Okay, so in our last class, 2 weeks ago, we started to look at this last module of the Discovering Buddhism program, module 14, which is called Special Integration Experiences. And so this isn't so much a teaching module, a learning module, but rather a practice one. This was specified by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, that people who do the Discovering Buddhism program, if they want to fully graduate and get their certificate, they need to do certain practices. These are what are normally called in the Tibetan tradition ngundro, which means preliminary practices. So in all the schools of Tibetan Buddhism, this is a tradition. And the idea is these practices are mainly to purify, clear away, get rid of negative karma and obscurations and negative stuff that sort of blocks us from being able to progress along the path and gain realizations. And also to accumulate merit, positive energy, which I like to think of as fuel. You know, it's like if you have a car, maybe a really good car like a BMW, you could drive really fast. But if there's no fuel, you can't go anywhere. So, so we have this precious human life, precious human rebirth, with which we can do so much, especially in terms of spiritual practice. We can reach these amazing high states of realization, nirvana, liberation, enlightenment. But we need fuel. I mean, this is just my own idea, okay? It's not something I heard from teachers, but this is how I think of merit. Merit is like fuel that enables us to actually go, get moving, progress along the path. So, so it's positive energy, okay? So there are a number of different ngundro or preliminary practices that are done. They can vary from one tradition to another, how they're done and so forth. But some of the more common ones are prostrations, doing prostrations. 100,000 is the usual number, or as many as you can. But you can also do more than that. You can do, many hundreds of thousands. It's actually said that Lama Tsongkhapa, I don't know if you heard this story, Lama Tsongkhapa did 100,000 prostrations to each of the 35 Buddhas. So that means a total of 3,500,000 prostrations. He was young, I think, probably in his 30s at that time, I don't know. Not so old at that time. I visited the place in Tibet where he did this practice, and it's a tiny little monastery there. And there's a room where they say, this is where he stood. And you can see these kind of footprints. This is where he stood when he did his prostrations. Anyway, it's very inspiring. So prostrations is mainly to purify, clear away, purify negative karma and so on, negative energy. So that's one of the practices that Lama Zopa Rinpoche specified for people to do. It's not obligatory, but if you do want to graduate from Discovering Buddhism and get the certificate, you need to do that, 100,000 prostrations. And they don't have to be done all at once, of course. You can do them gradually over time, 100 a day or 200 a day, and then, within a couple of years you'll be finished. And then another practice he requested students to do is the Vajrasattva practice, which is to visualize Vajrasattva and recite the mantra, the 100-syllable mantra. of Vajrasattva, and to do that 100,000 times as well. And generally, it's best to do that one in a retreat situation. I mean, it can be done 1 session a day or 2 sessions a day. But it's said that if you're supposed to do it on the same seat all the time, not move around. With prostrations, you can move around. You can do some here, and you can do some in New York, and you can do some in Bodh. But with Vajrasattva, you're supposed to do all of your mantras on one seat. So that means you can't really go for holidays until you finish your 100,000. So usually it's good to do it in a retreat situation. And there's a number of places that have group retreats, like Kopan. Every winter, I think, they have a 3-month group Vajrasattva retreat. Tushita and Dharamsala, I think they do theirs in the summer months. And there's a few centers in Europe or other places where there are group Vajrasattva retreats. So, 3 months, yeah. I mean, there's stories of people doing it in a month, but that's really pushing it.
So that's what you do the whole retreat? You sit and you...
Sorry?
This is what you do the whole retreat?
Yeah, you do usually 4 sessions a day. And so each session you do the sadhana, the visualization, then you recite mantras for however long. And yeah, but like I say, it's also possible to do it 1 or 2 sessions a day. But then if you're doing it that way, strictly speaking, you're not supposed to move around. You're supposed to always do it on the same seat. Does that make sense? So, yeah, you couldn't really travel, go for holidays. But you could check with a teacher. They might give you permission to be more lenient about that. Anyway, and so Vajrasattva is also for purification of negative karma. And then the other 2 practices Rinpoche advised was nyungnes, 3 nyungnes, and each nyungne takes just 2 days. It's hard work, but it's over quick. Yeah, during the nyungne, you do a sadhana of Avalokiteshvara, 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara, and that can take 2.5 to 3 hours. And within this sadhana, there's a number of different things that you do. One is actually the practice of the 35 Buddhas. That's within this sadhana. And there's also a point later where you do prostrations to Avalokiteshvara. There's a prayer of praise to Avalokiteshvara that needs to be recited 21 times while doing prostrations. What we usually do is we have a tape of Lama Zopa Rinpoche reciting it in Tibetan really fast. And it still takes 25 minutes to do 21 times of that. But if you do it in English, it'll take 40 minutes or 50 minutes. So that's a long time to be prostrating. And then there's also, visualization of Chenrezig, reciting mantras. So there's a number of different practices involved within the sadhana. And there's fasting. First day, you take the 8 Mahayana precepts. You eat 1 meal, lunch, before noon. And you can drink all you want. The second day is no eating and no drinking and no speaking. That's tough. Then the third day, you do 1 session in the early morning, and that's it. That's the end. Then you can start eating and drinking again. So it's a nice practice, a beautiful practice. It's hard, but when it's over, you feel really good. You really do feel kind of purified. So, and then the other thing, so there are 4 things. Prostrations, Vajrasattva, Nyungnes, and then a 2-week Lamrim retreat. which you can, I mean, again, you could do that on your own if you want, or you could go to a place which is holding a 2-week retreat, or you could also go to the Kopan course, November course, because that's like a retreat. You're learning about Lamrim, meditating on Lamrim, so that's not too difficult to fulfill that requirement. So what we're doing in these classes is I'm just explaining these practices. So last time I explained the practice of purification in general, and why we do it. It's to purify, purify negative karma, so that we don't have to suffer the consequences of our negative actions, but also that negative karma is like a blockage, obstacle to progressing on the path, having success in our practice and so on. So we want to clear that energy away. And I talked about the 4 opponent powers because the way to do purification is mainly using these 4 powers. Does anyone remember any of the 4 powers, what they are? Huh? Regret, reliance, refuge, yeah. Remedy. Resolve, yeah. I mean, there's different ways that these words are translated, but they're all R's. Regret, reliance, remedy, and resolve. But some people say, instead of resolve, they say determination or promise, commitment, something like that. So we looked at those last time, what they are, how to do them. And then we also did together a simple practice of Vajrasattva at the end. And everyone should have a copy of that if you want to continue doing it on your own. And I mentioned that there are different ways of visualizing Vajrasattva. Where did he go? Oh, he's here. Okay. So this is one version of how to visualize Vajrasattva. He's always white, but sometimes his hands are different. In this case, he's holding a Vajra, like this, in his right hand, and his left hand is holding a bell, and it's kind of resting on his hip or lap, whatever. And the practice that we did, his hands are crossed in front of his heart, holding the Vajra and bell. There's also Vajrasattva with consort. That's usually called Haruka Vajrasattva. So, anyway, you can pick your own, whichever version you wish to use. And then with the mantra, there's also different versions of the Vajrasattva mantra, which can get a little confusing. So we did last one, we did Om Vajrasattva Samaya. There's also a version that starts with Om Pema Sattva Samaya. So in the Nyungne practice, for example, after reciting the mantra of Avalokiteshvara, you recite this mantra to purify any mistakes that you made in your recitation. And there it's Om Pema Sattva Samaya instead of Om Vajrasattva. Pema means lotus. And it could be because Avalokiteshvara belongs to the lotus lineage of Kriya Tantra. So that's another version of the mantra. And then with Haruka Vajrasattva, it's also different. Om Vajra Haruka Samaya. So there's some differences. Try not to get confused about that. And also, Tibetans, the way Tibetans recite, they say Om Benza Sato. Tibetan language doesn't have V. So Vajrasattva is actually Sanskrit. Vajrasattva. And Tibetans, they don't have V, so they replace it with B. And I think they have trouble with this JR. So what they say is Om Benza. Om Benza. And then again, no V. So they say Om Benza Sato. So if you hear Tibetans reciting the mantra, they say it like that. Om Benza Sato Samaya Manubalaya, and so on and so forth. So again, you can take your pick. You can say Om Vajrasattva if you want, or you can say Om Benza Sato, as you like. And they say that the pronunciation isn't that important, but the important thing is to have faith. Have you heard that before? Because there are stories of people who recited a mantra incorrectly, sorry, but they had great faith. They really believed, they had faith in the deity, and they really believed what they were doing was right. And they were able to do kind of miraculous things. There was this one woman who, there was a famine going on. People didn't have enough food to eat. And she was reciting this one mantra in a wrong way. And she was able to put stones in a pot and cook them and eat them. They turned into food, like potatoes or something. So she was quite healthy, and you know, even though she was saying the mantra wrong. And her son, I think, who was a monk, you know, I heard that there was a famine going on in that area. So he was worried about his mother. He came to visit her, and you know, was surprised to see that she was looking kind of fat and healthy. And so she told him what she was doing. You know, she was cooking stones and eating them. And then he said, how come? How are you able to do that? And he said, oh, this mantra. And then she recited the mantra for him. And he said, oh, but you're doing it wrong. It should be like this. So then she started doing it the way he told her, and she couldn't cook the stones anymore. It didn't work. So then he said, okay, go back to doing it the way you did it before. So the point is, you know, the most important, I mean, of course we should try to say a mantra correctly and not just make a mess of it. But the most important thing is to have faith and, you know, really feel that it's a worthwhile thing to do. So today, I'm going to explain the practice of prostrations to the 35 Buddhas. So this is another practice for purification. So last time I asked everyone to do 3 long prostrations a day and check how it feels. So did you do that? Or more? I said at least 3. You can do more if you want. Did you notice anything? Did you feel anything when you did the prostrations? Sorry, I don't understand what you're saying.
Sort of, you have to stand up very quickly.
And not on your knees?
And not like come back on your knees in order to stand. But
I never heard that.
is there anything to do with is there anything about standing up forward the prostration that you should do it fast?
You are supposed to get up quickly. You're not supposed to lie down on the floor and, you know, spend a long time. You're supposed to come back up quickly.
But when you stand up, you have to do it like
You mean like this? I don't know anybody who could do that.
do it more quickly than what you do when you
Well, one thing I have heard is, let's see, you're not supposed to slide your hands. When you're going down, you can slide your hands like this, but when you're coming back up, you're not supposed to slide your hands, and you're supposed to pick them up and move them a few times. You need maybe 2 or so stages. That's one thing I've heard. But I think there's different ways of doing prostrations, because I was looking on YouTube, and there's lots of videos demonstrating prostrations, but some of them are not, I mean, they don't do it the same way we do. They do it differently. So maybe different schools, different traditions have different ways of doing it. So I've explained, you know, the way that I've learned from Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and if you ask another teacher, they may say something different. But did anybody notice any nice feeling or nothing, or?
For me, it's not new, because I've been doing it ever since I took refuge. But the great feeling that comes up again and again is I do it in the morning, okay? After my coffee. First I drink my coffee.
That helps you go fast.
So doing it really makes you come down to earth. I don't know how to explain it. Like, you do it and it's very, you know, the action is, it makes you very humble in a way. At least that's what it does to me. And it's like you're on safe ground. I don't know how to explain it, but when I do it, that's how I feel every time, you know? And it's kind of routine, so...
Yeah. Yeah.
Proportions. There are better proportions for the morning. For instance, if you're in a worry, you prostrate and you practice afterward, it changes. You worry less. Everything becomes
Yeah. I guess there can be different ways of understanding the benefit. Some people talk about surrender, you know, the whole idea of surrender and being more humble, not so arrogant, proud, full of ourselves, but surrendering, humility, overcoming ego and arrogance. One of the first Buddhist books, in fact, probably the first Buddhist book I ever read, was Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Suzuki Roshi. And in there he spoke about when we bow to our Buddha nature. And that, I thought that's a really nice idea. Because sometimes we may feel uncomfortable bowing to somebody else, you know, and we don't really do that, except unless it's the queen. But even with the queen, some people say, I'm not going to bow to her. So, you know, some of us may feel uncomfortable about the whole idea of bowing, but if we think bowing to the Buddha nature in our own mind and the minds of all sentient beings. Everybody has Buddha nature. So we're bowing to everyone, all living beings, to the potential for transformation, for purification, for achieving great things, achieving enlightenment. So I like that idea, and I share that with people. It can help people to feel more comfortable doing it. And also, you know, some people think of it as a kind of yoga. And in one way it is a physical thing, and you can get quite fit if you do a lot of prostrations. But it's not the same as yoga, at least, you know, like hatha yoga, because ideally when you're doing prostrations, you're using your body, speech, and mind. It's not just something you do with your body, but at the same time you're doing something with your speech, like in this practice, reciting the names of the 35 Buddhas. Or you can also do prostrations with Vajrasattva, recite the Vajrasattva mantra while prostrating. or Buddha's mantra. You can, you know, do different kinds of prayers or mantras while you're prostrating. But anyway, you're doing something with your speech, and then with your mind, you are at least trying to visualize the objects that you're prostrating to. Like in this practice, it's the 35 Buddhas. If you can't visualize all of them, just visualize the Buddha, one Buddha, and think that, you know, all the rest are there. Or Vajrasattva, or whatever. So you're visualizing some object that you're prostrating to, that you have respect for, you have faith in, you have devotion to. And these, you have these in your mind. Taking refuge and thinking, I want to purify myself, I want to help all sentient beings. So you're having these positive thoughts, positive states of mind. So all three of our doors, they call them the 3 doors with which we create karma, accumulate karma. So all 3 are involved: body, speech, and mind. So it's particularly powerful. Okay, so there's this little book, Confession of Downfalls, which is a publication of the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives in Dharamsala. And it contains commentary. One is by Nagarjuna, commentary by Nagarjuna to this practice. And then there's also contemporary commentary from Geshe-Ngawang Dargye, who is the teacher of the Tibetan Library, and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So some explanation from them. So I'm going to explain the main points from this book.
What's the name of the book again? What's the name of the book again?
Confession of Downfalls. And I was thinking, does anyone, maybe somebody would like to, what do you call it, scan it? Huh? Well, the part that contains the commentary starts on page 8 and goes to page 51. Because the last part of the book is about Vajrasattva. But it's so easy to find material about Vajrasattva. Anyway, we can talk about that later, but I just thought, because it's not so easy to get. You have to buy it in India, I think. I don't know. Unless you know somebody who's coming from Dharamsala, going to Dharamsala, coming back, they could get a copy for you. Huh?
Next week.
What? Okay. So we'll talk about that later. Anyway, it's not so easy to find this kind of material about this practice, so that's why I like this book. Okay, so this practice, what we call, prostrations to the 35 Buddhas, is actually a sutra. It's called the Sutra of 3 Heaps. This word heap is quite funny. It's skanda. It's the same word as aggregates, our 5 aggregates, skanda, and it translates as heap. And the 3 heaps, the word heap just means like a collection of many different things. So the 3 heaps here are a heap of confession, purification, and second is the heap of dedication, dedicating merits, and the third is the heap of rejoicing. So there's actually 3 practices contained within this one. So the story behind it, how this sutra came about, this is according to Nagarjuna. It's called the Declaration of Downfalls. It is said that the Declaration of Downfalls, this practice, originated from an instance when 35 awakening warriors, is a translation of bodhisattvas, 35 bodhisattvas who were beginners. Beginners means, that's not a strange translation. They're not yet enlightened. Okay, they're on the way to enlightenment. They went begging, and they caused the death of a beer seller's son. I'm sure they did it by accident. They didn't mean it. But anyway. And they felt very, bad about this. In order to lay this downfall bare, they urged the superior disciple Upali, who's one of the Buddha's disciples, to request this sutra from Buddha. And thus, the Buddha taught it. Okay, so there were these 35 bodhisattvas. They did a bad deed. They wanted to purify it. So the Buddha taught this sutra for them to purify. And then he says, some people may think that this teaching is not a sutra because it does not begin with words such as, thus have I heard. So sutras, Heart Sutra and Diamond Sutra and so on, they always start with, thus have I heard. This one doesn't. But Nagarjuna says, this is not the case because it is taught within the Stack of Jewels Sutra, Ratna Kutta Sutra. This is a Mahayana Sutra. I've heard of it before, but I don't know if it's translated into English. Ratna Kutta Sutra. So it's within that, this one. There are only 35 Buddhas mentioned because it was intended for 35 actual disciples of Buddha who had an intimate connection with the Buddha. It is not that you do not proceed in making obeisance to other fully awakened beings. Okay, so it's not that we're limiting only those 35 Buddhas. They're the only ones that I'm going to prostrate to and recite the names of. No, we can, it's nice to think the whole sky filled with Buddhas. There's 35, yes, but lots of other Buddhas as well. So I'm not going to read every single word, but just things that I find interesting. And he says there are two forms of confession, ultimate and relative. The ultimate form of confession involves meditation on the lack of intrinsic existence of all phenomena, emptiness. Actually, it's said that the best purification is meditating on emptiness. That's the main remedy or antidote to negative karma, defilements, and so on, meditating on emptiness. Although it's not so easy to meditate on emptiness, but if you can, that's the best thing to do. Okay, this is known as the greater confession. So that's the ultimate confession. Then the relative confession is a combination of the four opponent powers, the ones we talked about last time, coupled with regret, prostrations, and everything else, performed while cognizant of the illusory-like quality of phenomena. So we still have to think about everything being illusory. This is Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna is emptiness, 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 ultimate truth, ultimate truth, ultimate truth. So we've got to throw in some emptiness wherever he can. So anyway, of course, that is the best. If we can do that, if we can keep in mind everything is like an illusion. I mean, Lama Zopa Rinpoche does that too. He says there's no inherently existing I who is prostrating. There's no inherently existing Buddha that I'm prostrating to. No inherently existing action of prostrating. They're all labeled by the mind. So as much as we can remember that, even if we don't fully understand it, just to try to bring that into our mind is very good, very powerful. Okay, here's a bit more story. When this sutra was first requested, the endowed transcendent destroyer, meaning the Buddha, radiated light rays, which, for the sake of those bodhisattvas, invoked the appearance of 34 fully awakened beings. So there's 35 Buddhas. One is the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, and then 34 other Buddhas. So the Buddha invoked these 34 other Buddhas from the 10 directions along with a multitude of others. They remained there in space while the penitent awakening warriors, the bodhisattvas, after making offerings and generating the awakening mind, went for refuge. The disciples prostrated and laid bare their wrongs, and by doing this only once were purified of all evil and rose up to the first spiritual level as well as higher levels. I think that means the first bhumi, the first bodhisattva bhumi, which means that's when you have a direct realization of emptiness. You who live subsequent to this event should create a mandala and make offerings before images and paintings of these fully awakened beings. And here, thanks to Tal, everybody has an image of them. And then, having performed practices such as activating the awakening mind, bodhicitta, in accordance with your spiritual master's instructions, you should make confession. By doing so, all wrongs will be cleansed, and as a result, you will attain the completely perfected, fully awakened state of being. Thus it is said that you should perform the practice in this way. So it doesn't mean just once. Those bodhisattvas, they only did it once, and they managed to purify all their karma, but they were probably pretty highly realized anyway at that point in time, just on the verge of getting those realizations. But in our case, we probably have to do it many times. So it's good to do it every day if you can. If you can. It's a nice practice to do every day. And so what I thought to do is, go through and explain it, and then we can do it together. Those who can, and those who wish to. You don't have to, but if you would like to, you can do the practice together.